Okay, let's dive in. Right now, inside your body, there's just an incredible amount of activity happening all the time.
Yeah, cells talking, building, repairing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some are actually making this deliberate choice to, well, to self-destruct, which sounds pretty intense.
It does sound intense, but this controlled self-destruction, it's absolutely fundamental for life, really.
And we call that apoptosis.
That's the one. Apoptosis or programmed cell death. Think of it less like a disaster and more like a scheduled cleanup. Really necessary.
Schedules is a good word
Hmm.
because the scale of this, it's just staggering. Our sources mentioned, what, 50 to 70 billion cells?
In an adult human, every
See,
single day.
every day. That's almost hard to grasp. Like a galaxy's worth of stars just turning over inside you.
It's huge. Even for kids, it's something like 20 to 30 billion daily. Constant cellular renewal.
Wow. And this isn't a new idea, is it? People noticed bits of this way back.
Oh yeah, mid-1800s there were descriptions, but really pinning it down, naming it apoptosis, and clearly separating it from accidental death, necrosis.
Yeah.
That was later, 1972.
Right. Kerr, Wiley, and Curry. I saw that. They coined the term.
They did, based on a suggestion actually from a Greek professor, James Cormack.
And the word itself, apoptosis, from Greek for falling off, like leaves.
Yeah, exactly, like
Yeah.
leaves falling from a tree. It's quite a poetic image for cell death, isn't it?
It really is. And there's that whole pronunciation thing, too, like, is the P's silent?
Yeah, the eternal debate, like apoptosis, but however you say it biologically, it's just massive.
Massive enough for a Nobel Prize.
Absolutely. 2002, Brenner, Horvitz, and Sulston, they identified the actual genes controlling it all. That really cemented its importance.
Amazing. So, okay, for this deep dive, we've got these sources. One's a real scientific breakdown of apoptosis. The other links it to water fasting, natural health. So our mission today is really to unpack all that. What is this programmed death exactly? Why is it so crucial? What goes wrong? And the big one, can we actually, influence it
Right.
through things like fasting?
Right. Let's try and tackle that.
Okay, let's unpack this. So defining apoptosis again, clearly.
Okay. So it's a highly regulated, genetically controlled process. The cell essentially carries out its own very orderly self-destruction.
Orderly being the key, like a planned demolition.
Exactly. A planned demolition, not an accidental building collapse. That's more like necrosis.
Right, necrosis is totally different.
Fundamentally, necrosis is messy. It's from acute injury like trauma, toxins, a lack of oxygen. The cell basically bursts.
And spills everything out, causing inflammation.
Precisely. It damages the neighbors. Apoptosis, on the other hand, is designed to be clean, contained, minimal fuss.
So why? Why does the body need cells to kill themselves off like this?
Oh, for so many reasons. It's essential right from the start. In development, shaping tissues. It's literally how we get separate fingers and toes instead of webbed mitts.
Okay, sculpting.
Yeah, sculpting. And then throughout life, it's like the body's maintenance crew. Getting rid of old cells, damaged cells, cells that just aren't needed anymore, keeps tissues healthy.
And protection too, right? Against cancer and viruses.
Hugely important for protection. It eliminates cells with damaged DNA, the ones that could turn cancerous. And it gets rid of cells that have been hijacked by viruses to stop the infection spreading.
So it really is the body's built-in quality control, like identifying and neutralizing problems before they get out of hand.
You got it. It's an amazing system. And what's fascinating is just how tightly it's controlled. Once that go signal is given, it's a cascade. Very hard to stop.
Okay, so how does a cell get that go signal? Are there different triggers?
Yeah, broadly speaking, there are two main pathways. One is triggered by trouble inside the cell. We call that the intrinsic pathway.
Internal problems, like what?
Things like DNA damage that's just too severe to repair, or maybe extreme heat, radiation, even running out of nutrients or oxygen can trigger it. The cell basically senses, okay, things are really bad in here.
So the stress comes from within its own environment.
Right. And when that internal stress hits a critical point, the cell's power plants, the mitochondria, they release specific proteins, signal proteins.
Right.
These proteins then kind of assemble into this complex, which acts like the master switch for demolition.
Got it. Internal trigger, mitochondria release signals, master switch flipped. What's the other pathway?
That's the extrinsic pathway. Extrinsic meaning it comes from the outside. This is when signals arrive from other cells, like immune cells, for instance.
Well, the body itself is telling a specific cell, time's up.
Pretty much, yeah. These external signals latch onto specific receptors on the cell surface. They're literally called death receptors.
Got you name.
Yeah. So that binding event, it triggers the formation of a different kind of complex right there at the cell membrane. But the end result is similar.
It activates the executioners,
Yeah.
the demolition crew.
Exactly. Both pathways converge on activating these enzymes called caspases. They're the real workhorses here.
Caspases, like molecular scissors.
That's a great way to put it. They're designed specifically to chop up proteins. And they work in a chain reaction, a cascade.
How did that work?
Well, first, you have initiator caspases. They get activated by those master switch complexes we just talked about, the ones from the intrinsic or extrinsic pathways.
Okay, the first domino.
Right. And once these initiator caspases are active, they go and activate the main crew, the effector caspases.
And they do the actual demolition?
They're the ones, they spread through the cell and just systematically start dismantling everything, chopping up crucial proteins in the nucleus, the cytoskeleton, basically leading to the cell's death.
So signal, switch, initiator caspases, effector caspases, dismantle.
Well, that's the core sequence. And importantly, there are checks and balances all along the way. Proteins that try to stop apoptosis and others that promote it. The balance is key.
Fascinating. Okay, so the caspases are working, the cell's being dismantled. What does that actually look like, if you could watch it?
You'd see some pretty dramatic changes. First, the cell kind of shrinks and rounds up. Everything inside gets denser.
Okay.
Then the nucleus undergoes this really characteristic change. The DNA clumps together, condenses right up against the nuclear membrane. That's called pinosis.
Pinosis, got it.
Then the nuclear envelope starts to break down, and the DNA itself gets chopped up systematically into these neat little fragments.
Measured pieces, like you said.
Exactly. It creates this characteristic ladder pattern if you analyze the DNA. And then the cell membrane starts doing weird things. It bulges out, forming these irregular blobs or buds, membrane blebbing.
Blebbing. And those feet of death things.
Ah, yes, the apoptopodia, or beaded apoptopodia. These strange protrusions. The sources suggest they might actually help with the next stage.
Which is?
Fragmentation. The whole dying cell breaks apart into multiple, smaller, membrane-wrapped packages. These are called apoptotic bodies.
Like little garbage bags, neatly tied up.
There's a perfect analogy. They contain all the dismantled cell bits.
And then someone comes along to take out the trash.
Swiftly, yes. The body has professional cleanup crews, phagocytic cells like macrophages. They're alerted almost immediately.
How do they know which bags to pick up? Is there a signal?
There is a very clever one. The dying cell flips a molecule, normally kept on the inside of its membrane, to the outside. Phosphatidylserine is the main one.
So it's like putting a sign on the bag saying, "Eat me."
Exactly. It's a universal eat-me signal for phagocytes. They recognize it, bind to it, and engulf the apoptotic body. The process is called apherocytosis.
Apherocytosis, okay. And the beauty of this whole neat packaging and quick cleanup is no mess, no inflammation.
Precisely. Because everything is contained in those membrane-bound bodies, the potentially damaging or inflammatory stuff inside the cell doesn't leak out and harm the surrounding tissue. It's designed to be quiet, non-disruptive.
It's just incredibly sophisticated, which makes sense why, if this finely tuned process goes wrong, it causes big problem.
Huge problems. Apoptosis is such a fundamental balancing act. Tip it too far one way or the other, and the consequences can be severe.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Problem one, too little apoptosis. Cells that should die just don't.
Exactly. They stick around when they shouldn't. Maybe they have damaged DNA, maybe they're infected, maybe they're just old. They evade that death signal. And this is really central to how cancer develops.
Right, cancer cells are famous for not dying when they should.
They often have mutations that break their apoptosis machinery. Or they might overproduce proteins that block apoptosis, like they jam the demolition switch.
So cancer is, in a big way, a failure of this cellular quality control.
Absolutely. Think about the p53 protein. It's often called the guardian of the genome. Normally, if p53 senses serious DNA damage, it tries to pause things for repair. If repair fails...
It triggers apoptosis.
Right. But if p53 itself is mutated or shut down, which happens in many cancers, that safety mechanism is gone. Damaged cells survive, replicate, and accumulate more errors.
And viruses can mess with this too.
Oh, yeah. Some viruses, like HPV, make proteins that specifically target and disable p53 and other regulators. It helps the virus keep the host cell alive so it can replicate. Very sneaky.
Okay, so too little apoptosis, bad cells sticking around. What about the flip side? Too much apoptosis.
Also really damaging. This is when cells that are perfectly healthy, cells the body needs, get the death signal inappropriately and are eliminated.
And that causes problems like...
Well, it's strongly linked to neurodegenerative diseases. Think Alzheimer's, Parkinson's conditions where neurons, brain cells are dying off prematurely. It's also implicated in certain blood disorders and tissue damage after things like heart attacks or strokes.
And the sources really highlighted HIV here.
Yes, HIV is a classic, tragic example of hyperactive apoptosis driving a disease. The core problem in AIDS is the massive loss of CD4 plus T helper cells. These are crucial immune cells.
And HIV makes them die off too quickly through apoptosis.
Exactly. The virus uses multiple tricks to basically push these vital immune cells into suicide. It can activate those death receptors, mess with the internal balance of pro- and anti-apoptotic proteins, even induce apoptosis in nearby uninfected T cells, so-called bystander killing.
Wow, so the immune system just collapses because its key cells are dying too fast.
The body just can't replace them quickly enough? Understanding this, though, has led to research into new strategies, like that lock-in and apoptosis idea mentioned in the source, trying to trap the virus inside infected cells and then trigger their apoptosis before the virus can spread, using the cell's own system against the infection.
So it's crystal clear that the balance of apoptosis is just critical. Too little leads to uncontrolled growth, cancer. Too much leads to devastating cell loss and tissue damage.
It really hammers home the precision needed for health.
Which brings us right to that really interesting question from the other source. Can we do anything to influence this? Can lifestyle choices like water fasting actually nudge this balance?
Yeah, this is where things get really intriguing, the idea of using our body's innate responses. So water fasting, right? Just water for 24 hours or more.
Puts the body under a bit of stress,
Yes.
metabolically speaking.
A mild stress, yeah. Digestion slows right down. You shift into burning fat for fuel ketosis, and you get these significant hormonal changes like insulin levels drop, IGF-1 levels drop.
And those hormones are usually signals for growth, right? Linked to aging, maybe cancer.
That's the connection. So the proposed mechanism from the source is that in this nutrient-deprived state, the body kind of shifts gears. It goes into maintenance and repair mode.
Okay.
Part of that is autophagy, the cell recycling its own damaged parts. We've talked about that before. But the hypothesis here is that fasting might also selectively trigger apoptosis.
Selectively. In which cells?
In the dysfunctional ones, the damaged ones, the potentially mutated ones. The thinking is that these compromised cells might be less resilient, less able to cope with the metabolic stress of fasting compared to healthy cells.
Ah. So healthy cells tighten their belts and survive, but the weaker, potentially problematic cells, they get the apoptosis signal.
That's the hypothesis. It's like the body uses that temporary scarcity as a kind of internal audit, identifying and clearing out the weakest links, the cells that might cause trouble down the line.
Is there solid proof for this?
Well, the source mentions animal studies that are pretty suggestive. They show fasting can increase apoptosis in certain cancer cell types, and interestingly, it might even protect healthy cells during chemotherapy.
Protecting the good guys while hitting the bad guys harder.
That's the hope. Now, human studies specifically looking at fasting's direct effect on apoptosis rates in different tissues. Those are more complex, harder to do, and definitely more limited. But the overall concept fits with what we know about stress response and cellular maintenance. It positions fasting as a potential tool.
Potential and complementary, right? Not a magic bullet or a replacement for cancer treatment.
Absolutely not. That's crucial. Conventional medicine offers targeted attacks on disease. Lifestyle strategies like informed fasting, they're more about strengthening the body's own defenses, its own cleanup crews.
Okay. And thinking about lifestyle, water fasting is pretty intense. Are there maybe less extreme things mentioned in the sources that support this kind of cellular health and turnover?
Oh, definitely. The sources are clear that it's not just about extended water fasts. Things like intermittent fasting, shorter daily eating windows like 16.8 or maybe 5.2 weekly patterns can also nudge the body into some of those beneficial metabolic states more gently, more sustainably perhaps.
Makes sense. What about food itself?
Huge. Nutrition is key. Specific compounds in foods are highlighted. Sulforaphane, found in broccoli sprouts and other cruciferous veg.
Right, I've heard about that one.
Yeah, it's known to support cellular defense pathways. Same with compounds in green tea, turmeric. They seem to help with autophagy, reduce inflammation. Plus, getting enough omega-3s antioxidants, basically protecting cells from damage in the first place.
So, what you eat, and maybe when you eat it. Anything else?
Physical activity. Always important. Good for mitochondrial health, and we know mitochondria are central players in that intrinsic apoptosis pathway.
Okay.
And even thermal stress. things like sauna use or cold exposure, these can trigger beneficial stress responses, like producing heat shock proteins, which help cells manage damage and maintain proper function. It all contributes to cellular resilience and appropriate turnover.
So, looking at the big picture, it really seems like it shouldn't be a battle between conventional medicine versus these natural or lifestyle strategies.
Exactly. That's really the wrong way to frame it. Conventional medicine is incredible for acute problems, for targeted interventions, drugs, surgery. They save lives. They target specific disease mechanisms with high precision.
Indispensable.
Totally. But these natural strategies, informed fasting, nutrition, movement, maybe thermal stress, they work differently. They aim to enhance the body's own fundamental systems, boosting quality control, supporting apoptosis and autophagy, improving resilience. They're powerful for prevention, for metabolic health, for supporting overall function.
So, the ideal might be combining them, using medical care when necessary, but also building that strong foundation with lifestyle.
That seems to be the most powerful approach. You get this synergy. You treat specific issues with targeted medicine, and you support your body's innate ability to maintain itself, repair itself, and clean itself up through how you live. It's about building resilience from the ground up, helping you not just survive illness, but hopefully thrive.
That makes a lot of sense. Synergy, not opposition. Now, one crucial thing before we wrap up, the safety warnings about water fasting in the source were very prominent.
Yes, extremely important. We absolutely have to emphasize this. Water fasting, especially for extended periods, is not for everyone. It carries real risks.
Who should be particularly cautious or avoid it?
The sources are clear. If you're underweight, malnourished, have a history of eating disorders, definitely avoid it, or only do it under strict medical supervision. Same if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Also, people with type 1 diabetes, or type 2 if you're on insulin or certain meds, need extreme caution and medical guidance. Kidney disease, liver disease. These are also contraindications. And it can interact with medications.
So the bottom line is talk to your doctor.
Always. Before considering any kind of extended fast, talk to a qualified healthcare professional who understands your health history. There are supervised fasting centers, which might be an option for some, but again, under medical guidance, safety first.
Absolutely critical advice. Don't just jump into this.
Please don't.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've taken quite a journey into apoptosis, this fundamental, constant process of programmed cell death.
Yeah, the sculptor, the maintainer, the protector.
Right, preventing cancer, clearing infections. We look at the intricate pathways, intrinsic, extrinsic.
The caste-based demolition crews.
The neat cleanup with efferocytosis. And crucially, what happens when that balance goes wrong? Too little or too much.
And then we explored that fascinating connection to lifestyle, how things like informed fasting, nutrition, exercise might actually support and enhance this natural process of cellular turnover and cleansing.
Working with our biology, not just against disease.
Exactly. Leveraging that innate intelligence.
You know, thinking about apoptosis, this constant microscopic life and death dance happening inside us every second, it's kind of awe-inspiring, isn't it? This quiet, relentless maintenance.
It really is. The precision, the regulation.
It makes you wonder, what does that incredible built-in cellular wisdom suggest about how we could best support our own health day to day? Something to really think about maybe on your own deep dive after listening.